Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gina Mallon, Executive Director of the Parents League of New York. And thank you so much for joining us for tonight's event featuring Dr. Edward Hallowell, who will be discussing his latest book, ADHD 2.0. Many of you are probably familiar with Dr. Hallowell and his work, but you may not be familiar with the Parents League of New York. So we are the only nonprofit of its kind in New York City, and for over 100 years, we have been supporting families and schools through our advisory services, publications, programs, and speakers. And who better to offer us support than Dr. Hallowell, psychiatrist, thought leader, New York Times bestselling author, world-renowned speaker, and leading authority in the field of ADHD. Dr. Hallowell has authored or co-authored more than 20 books, including Driven to Distraction, which really started the revolution of our understanding of ADHD. He is a graduate of Harvard College and Tulane Medical School, and he was a Harvard Medical School faculty member for 21 years. He is a regular columnist for ADDitude Magazine, the host of the weekly podcast called Distraction, and founder of the Hallowell Centers in Boston, New York City, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Seattle. And if that isn't enough, he has always found time to write an article specifically for us, for our journal, the Parents League Review. And we were thrilled to reprint one of our favorite articles. It is a gem called Protecting Childhood, and it's in our 2021 edition. So I encourage everyone to read that article, and of course to read Dr. Hallowell's book, but certainly check out his article. You can find it on our website and in our archives. So it goes without saying that we are so grateful to you for all that you've done to support the Parents League and our community and our families, and obviously families all over the world. And it is an honor to have you with us tonight to discuss your book, which you've co-authored with John Ratey, or Ratey? I'm
Ratey.
sorry, Ratey, ADHD 2.0. So I just wanted to tell the audience that Dr. Hallowell will be speaking for about a half an hour, and then he is going to open it up for questions. He would really love for you to turn on your microphone and ask your questions. And the only caveat that we ask of all of you is when you are posing your questions to keep them more general in nature. So welcome, Dr. Hallowell. It is so great to see you again, even over Zoom. And I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. So I give you the screen and I'll see you later during a question and answer period.
Well, thank you so much, Gina. And it really does warm my heart to be with you. And I don't know if you'll know it, but Gina is wrapping up her wonderful 12 years of service to the Parents League so she can serve her immediate family and her father, who's in his 90s, even better. And everyone is going to miss you so much. That's for sure. You've been just a gem for everyone to work with. And as I say, it really warms my heart, and warms my heart to be speaking to a New York audience. You know, I have an office on West 72nd Street, but I haven't been there since last March. So it's almost a year because of this gall darn pandemic. And I miss New York. I miss New Yorkers, you know, and I'm stuck up here with all these stuffy Bostonians. I shouldn't say that since there's my native roots, you know. But I did write a memoir, since I'm an old WASP, and I described my ethnicity as the WASP triad, which is mental illness, alcoholism, and politeness. So we're sometimes too polite, but you know, I will talk for a while, and then I'd love to hear your questions, and I'd love to. I'm sorry we can't connect face to face, but at least we can voice to voice. And I want to bring you into this world of ADHD that I've been living in my whole life since I have the condition myself. I'm 71 years old now, so 71 years with it. It is something you're born with, it's genetic. I also have dyslexia, another misunderstood condition. And it's really my mission before I die to have people understand that these conditions are not altogether bad, that they're not deficit disorders, that in fact, they are comprised of positives and negatives. And my job is to maximize the positive and minimize the negative. I tell people I don't treat disabilities and disorders. I help people unwrap their gifts. And the fact is, embedded in this condition that is so misleadingly called ADHD, and the same thing for dyslexia, by the way, invariably there are gifts. Now, they can be hidden, they can be buried, they can be twisted, they can be warped, but they're there. And it's my job, and parents, teachers, and then the adults as well, to unwrap those gifts. It's not always easy to do. This condition can ruin your life if you're not aware of it. If you don't know that you have it, it can absolutely ruin your life. The prisons are full of people with undiagnosed ADHD. So are the halls of the addicted and the unemployed and the multiply divorced and the lost and the alienated and the, people who just can't seem to find their way, even though they've got a lot of talent. And that makes me think of the adult population, and that's the biggest undiagnosed group, are adult women in particular. It's very rare for adult woman to get the diagnosis. Instead, almost always they get misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety. Now, they have the depression and anxiety, but those conditions are caused by, in the wake of, the untreated ADHD. So what is it, and the term itself, we proposed an alternative term in this book. Attention deficit hyperactivity is so misleading. We don't have a deficit of attention. We have an abundance of attention. Our challenge is to control it. So far from a deficit, it's an abundance, but it's out of control. As I say, we have a Ferrari engine for a brain. We've got a way powerful brain, but we have bicycle brakes. We have the darndest time controlling how our mind goes. Our mind is like a toddler on a picnic. It just goes wherever curiosity leads it, with no regard for danger or authority. It's off into the lake, into the woods, stick its nose in a hornet's nest. I mean, we are driven by curiosity, but it's certainly not a deficit. If it were a deficit, it would be a form of dementia, which it certainly isn't. We are alert, alive, and super attentive. It's just not always attentive to the thing that we're supposed to be paying attention to. And then to call it a disorder completely slants it in the direction of pathology. Yes, there are troubling, indeed often crippling aspects to this condition, but at the same time, there are amazing superpowers. I see lots of entrepreneurs, millionaires and billionaires, who say the key to my success is my ADHD. So to call it a disorder really creates the problem, when the problem is believing that you've got a disorder. The problem is believing that you're less than, believing that you're a deficit disorder. And that, if it gets implanted early on in life, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You say, well, I couldn't go to medical school. I have a deficit disorder. I couldn't start a business. I've got a deficit disorder. I can't even clean up my room. How could I possibly run a business? Well, I can tell you many highly successful people who started businesses have it. The man who founded JetBlue Airlines, for example, David Neeleman, he's become a good friend. He has ADHD up the kazoo, or the wazoo, whatever it's up. But he's got it in spades, and he started JetBlue, then he left there and he started another airline in Brazil, and then another one in Portugal. Now he's come back to start another one. He's an amazingly brilliant, wonderful, generous man. But he's definitely got this condition, and I've ridden in his car, and it looks like a 16-year-old's car. I mean, just candy wrappers and old papers and tapes, and just a big, like a bomb went off inside of it. So Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder just loads it with pathology and is also inaccurate. So we propose as an alternative term, VAST, V-A-S-T. First of all, because this condition is vast, it takes in all of your mind and your life. And the acronym stands for Variable Attention Stimulus Trait, VAST. And that's because the two key elements of the condition that sort of define it are attention and stimulation. Our attention is wandering, varying all the time. We are consistently inconsistent. And then stimulation is what we're always in search of. We are in search of stimulation. And the key is to find adaptive forms of stimulation as opposed to maladaptive. The reason we're looking for stimulation is because we're looking for focus. Our base level is not, ordinary life just doesn't grab us enough for us to pay attention. So we need to pump up the volume. We need to make life more interesting, exciting, which is why we want to make things and create things and build things and discover things. You know, the people who colonized this country were full of ADHD genes. It's why this country is so loaded with it, why we lead the world in innovation and entrepreneurialism. Probably our greatest contribution to world civilization is democracy and entrepreneurialism, you know, and innovation. We are the innovators, and that's because we have a lot of this gene. We've got a lot of the tinkerer. I mean, Thomas Edison was a classic. And so our minds are just constantly going, constantly popping up with new ideas, new thoughts, new images, new feelings and schemes and strategies, and let's do this, let's do that, and you know, it gets caricaturized. Oops, there's a rabbit. You know, but it's not a caricature. These are brilliant ideas. I mean, David Nealon invented the electronic ticket. It just came to him, just popped. And he's the guy who came up with the idea of putting television screens in the backs of the seats on airplanes, you know, so, you know, again, stimulation. He was tired of getting bored on airplanes. And so he thought this up. And so it's part and parcel of the condition, is this generative, fecund, you know, kind of mind. And you know, that's where, you know, the pathology model, the medical model, misses all the good part. If you take the core symptoms of ADHD, distractibility, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, turn each one of those on their head and you get a positive. Distractibility, oh, that's so bad. Why don't you pay attention? Pay attention, pay attention. Well, what is distractibility but curiosity? If you didn't care what was going out there, you wouldn't pay any attention to it. But you hear something, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? We are amazingly curious, so much so that we have to learn how to ride herd on that, put the reins on that, you know, to bring it back. So you can't always be exploring, always dashing off in new directions. But it is curiosity that drives us, and it is curiosity that drives invention, that drives discovery, that drives innovation. So now the second symptom of the triad, impulsivity. That's what gets us into trouble. We make impulsive decisions. We speak out impulsively. Well, what is creativity but impulsivity gone right? You don't plan to have a creative idea. You don't say it's 2 o'clock, time for my creative idea, you know, and burp it up. You know, creative ideas come spontaneously, impulsively. They depend on disinhibition. If you're not somewhat disinhibited, you won't be creative. And then the third one, hyperactivity, you get to be my age, it's called energy. And I'm really glad I've got this little turbo pack on my back, you know. So again, what we're doing in this book is we're trying to expand the definition to include the positives, to include the wealth of wonderful stuff that if you don't go looking for it and develop it and nurture it, can get buried under layers of low self-esteem, of humiliation, of being told you're not good enough. And you get told that enough, and you know, you can give up. But we tend not to give up. And, you know, I tell the story in the book of an amazing man who really was tortured in school. He went to school in the Midwest, and he was paddled every day almost for throughout his school years, from 3rd grade all the way to 12th grade. It was a Lutheran school, and they believed in paddling kids, and it happened to him all the time. But when he left, he still had his spunk. He still had his big loving heart and his ability to make people laugh and his ability to create art. Well, that man is named Dave Pilkey. And those of you who have kids know about Captain Underpants, and you know about his amazing books that have now sold over 80 million copies. 80 million copies. And he has both ADHD and dyslexia. And again, he has turned those into the source of tremendous creativity and goodwill. I mean, kids adore him. And he's fulfilled his mission despite horrible abuse at the hands of adults who thought they were correcting him. So in the book, we also lay out some material that is really important, aside from describing the new way of looking at ADHD. There is recent research showing 2 networks in the brain that light up when you're doing something, when you're building something, constructing something, solving a problem, cooking, whatever it might happen, when you're constructively engaged in a task. There's a network that lights up 4 different regions of the brain together. It's a network called a connectome. And this is called the task positive network, the TPN, the task positive network. Now, when the project is over, when you've finished doing the constructive work, the old thinking was the brain kind of shuts down and takes a rest. Nothing could be further from the truth. When the TPN shuts down, when the task is completed, what lights up is what is called the default mode network. And the brain is actually more active in the default mode, uses more glucose, more oxygen, more energy in the default mode than in the task positive mode. And what happens in people with ADD, because of what some of the researchers call clunky connections between the connectomes, the imagination, which is the default mode network, starts churning out all kinds of negative stuff. You're bad, you're lousy, nothing's going to work out, you're a loser, you're ugly, you're fat, you're stupid, your plans will never, what makes you think you can do anything right? And we're talking about someone sort of going into a trance of this negative rumination, negative thinking, you can stay in that kind of negative state, that trance, for a long time, minutes, hour, and what happens is, you see, the search for stimulation, remember I said that's very important. Well, contentment is not stimulating enough. Contentment is too bland. You don't say he or she was riveted in contentment, but you do say he or she was riveted in self-hatred, in dread, in fear, in anxiety, in these horrible states that the default mode network tends to spew out. And that's why I call the DMN the demon. And the lesson is, don't feed the demon. Now, what are you feeding it with? You're feeding it with your attention. Remember I said it's gripping because, that's why you pay attention to it. It's riveting. It's horrible. It's torture, but you can't look away from it. Well, that's what you have to learn how to do. You can't out-argue the demon. It's your imagination. It will always win. It will always have a better comeback. It will always be able to say, you're stupid, a loser, you're ugly, blah, blah, blah. But what you can do is shut off its oxygen. And that's the attention. So you have to redirect your attention to something else. Fry an egg, dig a hole, turn on the television, call a friend, do a quick burst of exercise. Anything, do anything, but don't feed the demon. Remember those words, don't feed the demon, because it's one of the most horrible aspects of ADHD. Meds don't touch it. Is this perseverative, ruminative, negative down on yourself, down on life. And that's when we sabotage ourselves. We don't try, or we don't apply for the job, or submit the proposal, or raise our hand, because we've been slamming ourselves so much that we start using avoidance as a coping style, or we kind of give up. Or we lose our full-throated enthusiasm and daring do for life, which you need. I mean, that should be our long suit, that we're daring, that we take chances, we take risks. But if you allow the DMN, the default mode, the demon, to have at you too much, you'll find that you lose that kind of edge that ADHD ought to give you. Another, and that's an important point. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but if you can just remember, don't feed the demon. And if you can remember, this negativity is not reality. It is not reality. It is your imagination turning on you. It is not reality. Then you can shut it off by doing something else, not arguing it out, not psychotherapying it out, not medicating it out, but by literally starving it, by denying it your attention. Another new finding that we put into this book is very exciting. It comes from Jeremy Schmahmann, who's a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School. And he has been doing, his special area of interest is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is a region at the base and the back of the brain down here. It's a clump of neurons shaped like a kumquat, bilobed. And it's only 10% of brain volume, but it has 70% of the neurons in the brain. And it's far more important than I was taught. When I was taught in medical school, we learned about it as the sort of the region that controlled balance, coordination, automaticity. You know, when you learn how to play a piece, you don't have to think about it. That's cerebellar mediated. But what Schmahmann has shown is that it does far more than that the cerebellum is actively involved in higher cortical function, in thinking, in executive function, planning, organizing, the stuff that ADD folks were not so good at, and in emotional control. And in fact, if you injure your cerebellum in any number of ways, you can get what's called Schmahmann syndrome, named after Jeremy Schmahmann, and it looks just like ADHD. And so you see a demonstration of it from a deficiency standpoint, but from a therapeutic standpoint, what we're finding is that by stimulating the cerebellum, you can get improvement in the symptoms of ADHD and dyslexia, by the way. Now, how do you stimulate the cerebellum? You do exercises that challenge balance. Anything that it's got to challenge balance. So riding a bike isn't good enough. You got to ride a bike with no hands, or, but I don't recommend that. But there are ways to challenge balance, like stand on one leg. And then when you get good at that, stand on one leg with your eyes closed, or stand on a wobble board, or stand on a wobble board on one leg. You can keep making it more and more difficult to continually challenge balance. And if you do these exercises, and there's a man in England who's really been working on this for 20 years, and he has a whole set of graduated exercises. If you do them faithfully, 10 minutes twice a day, 10 minutes twice a day, not a lot, but it's not nothing. But if you do them faithfully, he's found that about 80% of people will experience significant improvement. And this is with no medication whatsoever. Now, you can be taking medication at the same time. It's not contraindicated. But you basically build up your cerebellum, because it's a plastic and trainable part of the brain. And I actually tell the story in the book, in the chapter I have on cerebellar stimulation, about a little boy in China, 8-year-old little boy, and I did it all via email with his mother. And from September to December, he went from being at the bottom of his class academically and in constant trouble for his behavior, to, by Christmas, the top of his class academically and getting gold stars for his good behavior. And he did it first by my explaining to him that he had a race car brain with bicycle brakes, that he wasn't a bad boy, by getting hugs from home and instead of punishments. And then by doing these cerebellar stimulation exercises for 10 minutes twice a day. And it was, even I was amazed at how quickly and how dramatically he improved. I'm still in touch with him. This was 4 years ago that I met him. And he just got into the best secondary school in China, according to his mother. She's so proud of him. And guess what? He's still doing the exercises. He won't stop. He doesn't need to do them anymore, I told him. But I don't speak Chinese, but through his mother. And I'm very excited about this as a non-medication intervention. The other non-medication interventions that you should be aware of, first of all, education, learning what it is, framing it in a positive way to get hope mobilized, and then coaching. And coaching is sort of what mom does minus the nag factor. So you hire someone to help reminders and organization tips and skills. And it's also a helpful way to get mom out of the struggle mode. And the child has to, or the adult has to be old enough to be coached and want coaching. The coaching is a real good modality. And then one of the ones we stress in the book, John Ratey, my partner, is become a real world authority on exercise, the impact of exercise on the brain, not just cerebellar stimulation, but exercise in general. He calls it miracle grow for the brain. And if you do get in the habit of regular physical exercise, that's really good. Now, if the exercise happens to be cerebellar stimulation, all the better. So skateboarding, skiing, rollerboarding, anything, but any exercise is really, really good for your brain and really helpful for not only ADHD, but depression and anxiety as well. There are other new findings in the book. We kept the book intentionally short because these days people want short. The manuscript I handed in was 125,000 words, but the manuscript that you'll see in the book is 50,000. So it was cut by more than half. And believe me, that was painful as the editor. But she was saying we want it concise and brief, and it is that. It is by far my shortest book, but it is full of practical tips and suggestions. And the next to last chapter is about medication, and that's called the most powerful tool that everyone fears. And it's simply the case that for whatever reason, the general public is terrified of medication. And part of it is because the press tends to play up the downside of medication, but they never write about the upside. When was the last time you saw, a New York Times article on, stimulant medication changes lives for the better? Well, the fact is it does change lives for the better. Can it be misused? Yes. Can it be dangerous? Yes. Can you become psychotic on it? Yes. Those things can happen, but they are pretty rare. What is the common story is the meds act as eyeglasses. They allow you to focus. They allow you to see better. They allow you to organize your thoughts. And they work about 80% of the time. 20% of the time, we're talking about stimulant medications like Ritalin and Adderall. 20% of the time they don't work. In my case, they do not work. My medication is coffee. And that works well for me. Coffee actually has more side effects, though. Coffee is a diuretic, a laxative. It can be cardiotoxic. If you stop it abruptly, you get a wicked headache. And if you drink too much of it, you get what's called caffeineism. You get the jitters. But prescription medication is side effect. Main side effect is that it cuts your appetite. Other side effects that can occur are immediately reversible by stopping the medication. Elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, insomnia. Some people just don't like the way it makes them feel. They feel they lose their sense of humor, their special sauce. If anything like that happens, you just stop it. So you don't have to suffer with it for more than a few hours. These meds are in and out of your system in a matter of hours. So a trial of medication is just that. It's a trial of medication. People often say to me, well, why don't we do a year or two of non-medication treatment first? And I say, well, I'm happy to do that. And I've written books about how to do that. But that's sort of like saying, why don't we try a year or two of squinting before we try eyeglasses? I mean, medication is the most proven intervention we've got, the most researched. And it's been around, stimulant medication, to treat what we now call ADHD since 1937. I mean, most people don't realize it's more than 80 years of experience we have with this. So we know very well what to look for and what to watch for and how to monitor it. Now, believe me, I in no way try to persuade people to take medication, But what I do is try to make sure they have the facts. Because if you have the facts, there's really no reason not to try it unless it's against your religion. People ask me, do you believe in Ritalin? My answer is it's not a religious principle. It's not a matter of believing in it. It's a medication. And like all medications, it can be helpful or harmful depending upon how you use it. And I'm here to tell you how to use it. Most of the time, people's resistance to trying it is rooted in wrong information or lack of information or both. And there's just a ton of wrong information on the internet. So you need a guide to help you sift through it. And that's what we doctors are here to do. There's pretty much unanimity in the medical community that stimulant medication is safe and effective. You just want to see a doctor who knows what he or she is doing. But the general public still tends to fear it. Most people who come to see me start off by saying, whatever happens, I'm not going to try medication. And I say, that's fine. I'm not here to pitch medication to you, but would you allow me at least to tell you the facts and see if you still feel the same way, then by all means, we'll continue on a regimen of no medication. Again, coming back to my new book, ADHD 2.0, I really, am hoping before I die that these two conditions, ADHD and its cousin dyslexia, will be seen as they truly are, which is potential liabilities, but also potential superpowers. And if you manage them properly, they can turn into what they turned into for David Nealman and what they've turned into for so many other people. Sort of the resource that you can't buy and you can't teach. Creativity, originality, think outside the box, drive, initiative, intuition, the ability to see beyond, the ability to develop and create. And in fact, that's one of the chapters we emphasize in the book, that you need to have a creative outlet. The chapter is called Find the Right Difficult. We need difficult. Easy is boring, and we can't do boring. We need difficult, but we need the right difficult. And it's got to be the kind of difficult that allows your creativity to gain expression. We ADDers, we're like cows. We need to be milked. We need to express our creativity. And in my case, I found my right difficult in high school. It's writing. And I found that I was drawn to it, and that when I was writing, I lit up. Now, writing is nothing if not difficult, and it's never as good as I want it to be, and I suffer with it, but I'm wedded to it. I'm about to start my 22nd book, not because I'm ambitious to write books, but because if I don't have a book going, I get depressed. Well, most of us with ADHD are like this in one way or another. If we don't have some creative outlet, maybe it's a garden, or maybe it's building a boat, or maybe it's planning a trip around the world, or maybe it's trying to track down the vaccine, and whatever it might happen to be, that creative outlet, when we pursue that creative outlet, it's so powerful. And it's really should be part of every treatment plan, finding a creative outlet. And then the final intervention that I want to stress before I stop for questions is the power of connection. Boy, oh boy, have we ever learned the power of connection and the problems caused by disconnection during the pandemic. We need to connect. We need to connect. I call it the other vitamin C, vitamin connect. When we get enough of it, we feel vibrant. When we don't get enough of it, it's like a vitamin deficiency. We feel sullen. We feel hangdog. We don't have our normal zest, our normal pizzazz, our normal sparkle. We need that dose of vitamin connect. And it's harder to get now because, of course, it's always best in person, and we can't do as much in person. But you can now in markets and stores. You can make eye contact, smile, make conversation. I've taken to walking my dog every morning, and the other dog walkers, we exchange conversations, and the dogs do their thing, exchanging conversations, and it's a marvelous way to get a dose of connection, and take it seriously and think of ways in this difficult time of distancing You have to physically distance, but you don't have to socially distance. You can still connect with others via email, what we're doing right now via Zoom. It's not the same as in person, but it's better than nothing, that's for sure. And you know, you want to capture the energy. I hope you have felt some energy from me. You know, I know it's hard, I can't see you, but I'm feeling for you. I'm hoping you're with me. I want to reach out and touch you. I want to say, this is good news I'm giving you. And if only people could understand this, you know, all those adults who are underachieving and could be doing so much better, they're one diagnosis away from having a magnificently changed life. The women out there who are thinking they've got depression, and it's not that, it's untreated ADHD, or the first grader who's just being told over and over again to try harder. Telling someone with ADD to try harder is like telling someone who's nearsighted to squint harder. It misses the basic point. And so this is the good news I'm wanting to share with you this evening, and with this book, which obviously I hope you'll run out and buy, ADHD 2.0. But mostly I hope you'll buy the information that I'm giving you. I hope you'll buy it and metabolize it and share it. It's good news, unlike a lot of what we get these days. This is really good news. Once you get this diagnosis, life can only get better. The only question is how much better, but it will get better. And keep in mind the tips that I've offered you tonight. I'd love to hear from you, by the way. If you want to contact me, my website is drhallowell.com, drhallowell.com. And my email address is drhallowell@gmail.com. So I'd love to hear from you. And I still do see patients on via Zoom, and you know, this is what I live for. So let me open up now and take your questions.
So as we mentioned, this is Blair from Parents League of New York. As we mentioned at the beginning, please, if you want to verbally ask your question, please raise your hand. You'll see the little yellow hand at the bottom of the screen, or at the top of the screen if you're on an iPad or another device. And or you can type your questions in the Q&A.
So we have, this is Gina Mallon too from the Parents League, and we have a few questions already in the Q&A. And so maybe I will ask Dr. Hallowell on behalf of the audience some of the questions. So there were a couple of questions about ADHD, and is it hereditary?
Yes, it is. This is one of the most highly heritable syndromes in all of the behavioral sciences. It's you don't inherit the gene for ADD, but you inherit a collection of genes that predispose you to develop it. Like everything else, it's both nature and nurture, but the contribution of nature is high. And the odds are if one parent has ADHD, chances are 1 in 3 that a given child will have it. If both parents have it, chances are 2 in 3. Now, those are just odds, because in my family, I have it, my wife does not, and all 3 of our kids inherited it, which I'm very glad of. You can acquire it, by the way, but acquired ADHD via head injury or anoxia at birth, that kind of thing, is far less common.
I see that we have a live question from Rachel.
Hi.
Hi, Rachel.
Can you hear me? Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I've just done a deep immersion in your writing.
Oh, thank you.
My 15-year-old son was diagnosed recently, and he disagrees with the diagnosis. And I wondered if you had encountered that before.
All the time, particularly with young men. And it usually means that he feels in some way put down by it. And he feels in some way that you're telling him he's impaired, or he's crazy, or he's like his weird friend who takes Ritalin, and you know, it just pushes various buttons that he wants no part of. And so what I found the best thing to do is just say, okay, let's talk it through. and destigmatize the diagnosis for him. You know, say it's just a shorthand for a collection of symptoms. I say, I agree, ADHD is a terrible term. I mean, who would want a deficit disorder? So, you know, I come on with vast, but you could call it tuna fish sandwich if you wanted to.
Yes, I said that exact thing.
Yeah, so, and it might be better if someone other than mom or dad had this discussion with him, because he probably thinks you're trying to foist something on him, and he's used to being pushed around by you because you're such a bully, you know, and you know, things from parents to adolescents can be sort of rejected out of hand. But the main message for him to get is this means this is good. This means he's got special gifts. This means he's got, you know, special talents. It's just that he needs to help in unwrapping them so they can serve him well. You know, his Ferrari engine needs the brakes strengthened, so the Ferrari can win races instead of crashing out on curves.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm glad to hear it's common.
Oh, very common. Oh,
for
more
boys,
common.
for a 15-year-old boy.
For boys, far more common than not. The first
Great.
reaction I get from a 15-year-old is obscenities, you know. And so,
thank you. I really love the new book.
thank you.
Highly recommend it to all.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And it looks like we have a question from Sonia.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for tonight. I just want to say my 11-year-old son has ADHD. He's on medication. He's in 6th grade right now, and I'm constantly getting emails from his teachers that he's missing 5 assignments here, 6 assignments there, 10 assignments. So he's constantly behind in assignments or not able to keep track of them. And he's also kind of acting out at home. And so I was wondering, what are some, I don't want to say punishments, but some disciplinary actions that you can give them without making them feel stupid or down on themselves? But
he knows he has ADHD?
Yes, he does.
Okay, and so the beauty of the race car brain with bicycle brakes model is it leads right into what you're saying. So when you have to intervene, instead of saying, you bad boy, why did you punch out your sister?
Right.
Or why did you steal the apple off the table? You say, your brakes failed you. Okay,
Okay.
you know, you're still intervening, but instead of impugning his character, you make it mechanical. Your brakes failed you. We got to work on your brakes.
Okay.
He says, and they'll buy that. Yeah, I got to work on these darn brakes. And there are various ways to do that. But you're preserving his, you know, self-esteem. You're not shaming him. And that what's really toxic is shaming. And so
Yes.
you still intervene. You say your brakes failed you. And you might say you got to apologize to your sister, and he'll say, why should I? She's a doofus, whatever. But you know, you basically don't want him to think that he is bad. And that's
Right.
what does the damage. So your brakes failed you. We work on strengthening your brakes. And how do you do that? Sleep, diet, exercise, medication, insight, practice. You know, it's like going to the gym and pumping iron. You're pumping your brakes. And every time you resist a temptation, your brakes get stronger. And
Okay.
you know, and so it's a wonderful non-shaming way of intervening. But you do have to intervene. You can't let him just pummel his sister, you know.
Well, like, what kind of consequences can you reasonably give them, like when they're not doing their schoolwork or they're doing things
in
that-
general, consequences don't work well. The
Okay.
obvious ones are, you know, timeout, taking away electronic devices, grounding, you know, all the traditional ones. The one not to use is hitting him, obviously, but
Right.
you know, there was a time when spanking was pretty routine, but now it's not, which is good because it doesn't work. So you want to put your imagination more into constructive incentives. Any expert who says you shouldn't bribe children doesn't have children.
Exactly.
But bribery is an essential tool of parenting. So, but beware, these ADD kids are born entrepreneurs. So you offer them 25 cents and you'll be offering them $25 before you know it. So just be careful of that. There are natural consequences. If you break something, you've got to pay to have it replaced, you know, and by extension, you could say if you hurt someone's feelings, how are you going to mend those? You know, you want to make them constructive, natural consequences, consequences that depend on pain and suffering. These kids and adults, for that matter, we're so proud and stubborn. We'll say, "Fine, lock me in my room. I don't care," and they'll just stick it to you, and they'll end up, you know, you're thinking, "Gosh, what can I do?" And now I want to beat him with a stick, but you know, the negative consequences, as tempting as they are, they just don't work. You know, and so you want to put your imagination more into persuasion, inducements, incentives, those kind of things, and then you know, trying to have a discussion when it's not in the heat of the moment about how can we create peace around here. You know, how can we get out of these daily struggles, and that's why often working with a therapist, family therapist, that kind of thing, who can act as a referee and help you develop contracts and agreements can help as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate your advice.
Sure. I see a lot of these written down.
So there are so many great questions, but one is, how do we get schools to respect and honor our children diagnosed with ADHD? I know you touch on that in your book about creating stellar learning environments.
Yeah, it with schools, you know, it really is, and I'm a product of my life was saved by independent schools, and so, you know, I am deeply indebted to independent schools. But unfortunately, in the private school tradition and the school tradition in general, there's this very, very deep, unexamined conviction that hard work conquers all. So you're pretty much, the suggestions you get come back to ask for extra help, work harder, get organized, get your act together, apply yourself, you know, that theme. And you know, hard work always helps. So there's nothing against that. But as I said, when it comes to ADHD, it's a matter of working smarter, not just harder. And that's where coaching can help, learning strategies, and medication can help. You know, like I said, squinting instead of eyeglasses, you know, try the eyeglasses. So, you know, and help schools understand that you're not watering down a curriculum by offering accommodations. You know, you're allowing a person to, as my friend Priscilla Vale used to say, they're not looking for the easy way out, they're looking for the right way in. And so schools need to help them find the right way in. These kids are not lazy. They really are not. They want more than anything to do well. I mean, everybody wants to do well, but they can seem like they're lazy. They can seem like they're help rejecting. They can seem like they're surly and arrogant, but underneath it all, they want like crazy to shine. They want like crazy to do their best. They're tired of messing up, you know? And so if you can recognize that as a teacher and make a connection with the kid who's on the outs and see something special about him, you can really turn a life around. I mean, you know, so it's up to us to help private schools understand. I'm part of something called the Robin Project now, where we're trying to go to schools and promote connection. As I see it, the big toxin in society today, and schools in particular, childhood in particular, is disconnection. And, you know, it drives depression, substance abuse, alienation, lack of motivation, violent behavior, you know, and the antidote is connection. And I discovered this, you know, 20 years ago when I consulted the Harvard chemistry department, because they had a suicide there, and they had a rash of suicides. And it was caused by disconnection. And the solution was connection. And, you know, I won't go into it in detail because it's complicated, but you don't create connection by telling people to connect, because it's not that easy. You have to create environments that invite connection. Well, food is the great connector. So one of the things we did was we had a buffet in the department library, and these kids would come out for food where they wouldn't come out for a mixer. And you know, there are other ways that you promote connection, and you find the the isolated kids, you find the ones who are eating alone and whatnot, and you come up with some creative plan to allow them to connect. And the line, and another discovery out of recent research is connection is contagious. So is disconnection. But so if you help one disconnected kid connect, then you're going to help every other kid in the room. And guess what? What drives moral behavior is not fear of punishment. It's not memorizing the 10 Commandments. What drives moral behavior is feeling that you're a part of the larger group, that you're a part of the community. You don't want to deface it. You don't want to steal from it because it's your part owner. And so essentially a program of moral education at its most fundamental is a program that promotes and fosters connection and opposes disconnection. Disconnection is the toxin. And gosh knows we've seen enough of that in this country lately. And disconnection is tearing us apart. It absolutely ruins and destroys people. Absolutely ruins and destroys people. We need to be building bridges. We need to be connecting. And then more particularly with schools and ADHD, what they need to do is learn that the way to improve life is not just to work harder. It's to work smarter, work with a coach, try medication, those kinds of things. And this is a very solvable problem. You know, I've been working at it for a number of years, but it's gaining momentum. And gosh, if you want to really, help the world, help your school understand this condition better.
Okay, we have a question from Safia. Safia, you have the ability to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thank you for taking the question. My name is Safia. I have a 9-year-old daughter who got diagnosed 2 years ago with I was told heavy ADHD and heavy dyslexia, whatever that means.
Yeah.
My husband is also dyslexic and has ADHD, never diagnosed, obviously. We learned
He must be a dynamic, interesting man.
Yeah, he's a jeweler and an entrepreneur, of course.
There you go. There you go.
And she's in a specialized school, which is a lifesaver, and she's medicated. And I was wondering, how do we raise a daughter now? How are these children supposed to evolve as teenagers and young adults nowadays? And how can I help her grow and evolve in the best possible way?
Oh, I love her. I mean, my first rule of parenting, and my wife and I have 3 kids. They're now 31, 28, 25. So I've been down the road. My first rule of parenting is have fun with your kids. Enjoy your children. If you're enjoying them, you're doing it right, unless you're just smoking pot with them all day. But if you're enjoying your kids, you're doing it right. So don't turn it into a battle, a struggle. Don't beat up on yourself, and don't worry, if they get into one scrape or another. Just stay connected. That's the magic ingredient. Stay connected. Have family dinner, have family bedtime stories, have family outings, sit on the backyard, immediate family, you can still be there in person, without a mask, and watch TV together. TV gets put down too often by experts. TV is great. Too much of anything is not good, but some is absolutely great, and TV can be a great connector. So just, obviously get her ADD taken care of, but the main thing is just to love her and keep encouraging her and looking for her talents and fanning those flames, and let her curiosity and enthusiasm carry the day. She'll need more structure than the average person needs, but you can easily create that. And then enjoy her, just enjoy her. She'll be a delight. She'll test you. She'll get into difficulty one way or another. One thing, when she gets old enough to start dating, and I've just seen this over many, many years, people with ADD tend to fall for train wrecks. So try to steer her away from train wrecks. And the reason they do is train wrecks are stimulating. Remember, I said we're always looking for stimulating. And then we tend to be incredibly big-hearted. So we want to save people. And you think, oh, I can see his good side, or I can, and you want to save him. So it's usually not a very good outcome that happens for her. That she's nowhere near dating age, so you just stick that in the back of your mind. And
I also had a very small questions regarding the chaos. She does not have, she thrives in a completely chaotic play environment. So Legos and LOLs and everything laid on the floor, and it's really a war zone. But she says that her brain's like that, and it drives me crazy.
You just want to have structure around it, boundaries around it, and then you can help her. You got to ask her to clean up afterward. You've got to ask her. You don't want to enable someone who's going to be have mess piles, but don't frame it as a moral failing. That's just the way her mind works. By the way, is she on medication?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only way for her to sit in class and learn.
Yeah, just make sure you're getting maximum mileage out of medication, because it's by far the easiest intervention we've got. And some kids are wrongly medicated or under medicated. So you want to make sure you're getting maximum mileage. In other words, target symptom improvement, and then make sure she's medicated all day. A lot of kids take medication that wears off around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What you should do is give them what I call a homework pill when they get home, and make it short acting so it'll wear off by the time they go to bed.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. I noticed one question someone asked about where to get the cerebellar exercises. You can go to a website that the guy who developed this, Winford Dorr, has. He's in England, but the website is the word distraction .zing, Z as in zebra, zingperformance.com. So distraction.zingperformance.com. And that'll take you to the website that'll tell you about what the program includes and how to get it if you want to.
Excellent. Next question from Amadine.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. My question is, are there kind of food that trigger or make the symptom worse of ADHD? Are there food to avoid or food to instead to eat more to help those symptoms?
Yes, the basic tenets of nutrition apply. In other words, try to eat whole foods as much as you can. Try to avoid junk foods as much as you can. Sugar seems to be a real culprit. So a lot of people with ADHD, go for the gallon of ice cream at midnight kind of thing. And the reason is carbs are dopamine agonists. Carbs stimulate the shot of dopamine, and that's what we're always looking for. We're looking for that shot of dopamine, and carbs will do it. So you want to try to really limit sugar. Aside from being bad for your teeth, it's bad for your system, and sugar in general is just not good for us. So try to eat whole foods. Vegan is the healthiest diet there is. I can't do it. I've got to have my cheese, and I got to have my dairy, and I got to have my meat. So I'm 71 though, so who cares? But I want to be 101. So whole foods, and then in terms of supplements, I particularly recommend Omega Bright fish oil, OmegaBrite. Now they sponsor my podcast, so I have to tell you that there's a financial interest there because they sponsor my podcast. But I came after them to sponsor my podcast because I liked the product so much. So I liked Omega Bright before they started sponsoring my podcast. But I recommend Omega Bright fish oil. The reason brand matters is you want to make sure it's pharmaceutical grade so you don't get mercury contamination. I recommend that supplement, and I also recommend vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin B12, and then when you go past that, you get into a huge realm of supplements, and I take a whole bunch of them every morning. I don't want to tell you everything I take. Number one, it would be embarrassing. And number two, I can't vouch for them. But if nothing else, I have the most expensive urine in Boston. You can be your own experimental animal and see what works best for you.
Okay.
But a healthy diet is the main thing, and avoid contaminants and try to keep sugar on the low side.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, next question. We have time just for one more question. We're up against 8 o'clock here. So Xanth, you're next.
Hi, thanks so much. This has just been terrific. I have gotten so much out of it. And as you said, it is good news. And I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you.
When you were talking about the negative self-talk that
Yeah.
these kids get into, that applies to my daughter so much. She just feels so badly about herself. And we're not able to reason with her about it. And you said, don't feed it, don't give it your attention, give it, put your attention on something else, but
Right.
that's difficult. Do you have any suggestions or techniques, to give to kids or teenagers about how they can do that?
How old is she?
She's 15.
Oh my gosh, she's old enough to learn about the DMN. If you said 8, I'd have some other ideas, but at 15, teach her about the DMN. Just tell her, there are these 2 connectomes in your brain, 2 sets of 4 neurons. And when you're doing something constructive, creative, solving a math problem or baking a cake or whatever it might happen to be, the TPN lights up and, you're not hating yourself. You're doing something productive. When it's over, when the TPN shuts down, then what lights up is the default mode network. And that's the demon. And that's what spews out all this horrible negative stuff. And you feed it, you pay attention to it because it's gripping. And you also believe it. So you don't believe the positive. Oh, you're just paid to say that. You're my mother. But this demon, it's right. I'm stupid. I'm ugly. I'm never going to succeed. I'm just a failure. I'm a waste of space. And I believe that. They think it's the truth. But really what it is gripping. It's stimulating. So teach her, this is the default mode network. It's the demon. It lies to you. And you pay attention to it because the negativity is stimulating. And you're looking for stimulation. But you're allowing this nasty, twisted part of your imagination to torture you. And what you should do instead, you can't out-argue it. It will always win the argument. She'll always tell you why she's bad. But what you can do is redirect your attention to something else, reactivate the task positive network. There's a chapter in the book about it, and she's old enough to understand this. I'm sure she's actually very smart, and it's very liberating. It's the most powerful insight that I've come across in a long time in terms of how to modify your thinking and get rid of, because this stuff is demonic. It really is. It affects people of all ages. And if you can learn not to feed the demon, oh my gosh, you will save yourself time, energy, just suffering unnecessary. And your poor daughter is suffering unnecessarily. You can't argue her out of it. You can't argue her to thinking she's a good person, a beautiful person, a smart person. What you can do is teach her how to starve the demon. Don't feed the demon, and instead activate the task positive network.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, it looks like we are nearing the end of our webinar tonight, and we could listen to you forever. I just can't say enough about this evening. We have lots and lots of questions, and so many people that are so grateful to your talk tonight. And I have to say, I received a text from someone who was watching the webinar, and she said, he's giving me life. Oh. And I think we can all agree that you have. You are spreading such a positive message to all of us who either have ADHD or know someone or a family member. Your positive message has been so inspiring and helpful. So thank you. Everyone, remember to check out Dr. Hallowell's book. As he said, it is short. It's definitely shorter than, because I have all of your books. It's definitely short, and it'll answer a lot of the questions that you have all put in the Q&A. So please check out his book. And thank you again, Dr. Hallowell, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you for all your work with Parents League. And thank all of you for tuning in tonight.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.